April 20th Finance Meeting Committee. I'm Vince Cox, your committee chair representing Pinellas County. We'll go around the room and introduce all the other members.
My name is Richard Bennett. I'm a commissioner in North Reddington Beach, and I represent the beach communities.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dan Saraki, mayor of the city of Oldsmar.
Mayor. I always hate following him. Jeff Gow, city commissioner representing the great city of Dunedin.
Josh Holman, City of St. Petersburg.
Brad Miller, PSDA.
Okay, and this meeting is now called to order. Now is the time for public comment. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak?
There are no public comments.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to our action items. Our first action item is to approve the minutes of March 23rd. Do we have a motion?
Move approval.
I'll move that we approve the minutes of March 23rd.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Bennett made the motion. Mr. Shulman made that second. Thank you, sir. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Met passes. Okay, now we're gonna have Amanda Baird, our marketing manager, and Al Burns, oh, there you are. Director of Procurement, snuck right up there. Will walk us through this recommendation to add another marketing services to our contractor, to our efforts. Al, would you introduce this for us, please?
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, Finance Committee members. Al Burns, your highly motivated procurement director. This morning, I want to introduce Miss Amanda Baird to you. For those that don't know, Amanda led the marketing department while Miss Fox was on maternity leave, and it was an extreme pleasure to work with her. And she took the lead on this solicitation or contract we're bringing before you. So she's highly motivated this morning as well, and I would like to introduce once again my colleague, Miss Amanda Baird.
Good morning, Finance Committee. As Al so wonderfully introduced me, my name's Amanda Baird. I work very closely with Whitney Fox. Today we're coming before you to talk about adding an additional marketing services contractor. We have an excellent relationship with our marketing agency of record, Jones Worley, who've produced some wonderful work for us. The only thing that contract does not contain are clauses allowing us to spend federal grant dollars on marketing, communications, and education efforts. As Al will explain, by procurement rules, those clauses have to be included from a contract from the very beginning, requiring us to go out to RFP for a contractor with those clauses. Through the RFP process, we found a wonderful contractor who we're very excited to work with and add to our marketing and communications toolbox. That will allow us to use federal grant dollars when necessary on those outreach, education, and communication efforts. So I'll turn it back over to Al to talk through the RFP process.
Great job, Amanda. In February of this year, we issued an RFP in accordance with procurement policy, PSTA's procurement policies and procedures. On March 1st, we received 7 proposals. We received proposals from Aqua Marketing and Communications Incorporated, Bow Stern LLC, Jones Worley Design Incorporated, who's currently under contract, Quest Corporation of America, Media Beef Incorporated, Transcosmos America Incorporated, and the Brand Advocates. On March 10th, we held an evaluation committee meeting. It was a public meeting, and we had a tremendous attendance at that meeting. At the end of the meeting, the proposals were ranked in the following order: Bow Stern LLC, Aqua Marketing, Quest Corporation, Jones Worley Design, Media Beef, Brand Advocates, and Transcosmos. After that 7, we brought the 3 highest ranked firms in to give presentations. They all did a magnificent job, committee members. They all did a great job. However, Aqua Marketing and Communications Incorporated was the firm that the evaluation committee recommended that we bring before you this morning. Some of the reasons that they recommended was their in-depth experience in public transit, government experience, and they won campaigns in many of these areas. They have specialized skills in planning, creative services, and website design, which is one of the key components of this new contract. As your DBELO, or your small business person, it's also noted that they are a Pinellas County company. They reside right here in Pinellas County, so they know all of your constituents, all of our riders, and they're familiar with this area. One of the most important things for my boss is that their pricing was also competitive and in line with the budget. As Amanda said, as it pertains to the fiscal impact of this contract will be funded by operating and federal grant dollars. As Amanda said, in the first Jones-Worley contract, or the contract that we have for marketing services currently, we do not have federal clauses inside that contract. And it is prohibited by the FTA to add federal clauses after a contract has been awarded. Therefore, that is the main reason we went out for this contract. With that, Mr. Chair, the recommendation is approve a one-year contract with two-year options for marketing services with Aqua Marketing and Communications, Inc. I'm sorry, I apologize, Mr. Chair. On Zoom, we have Dave DiMaggio. I'm looking like well, we have the president and CEO of Aqua Marketing is also. Good morning, Dave. Can you wave hi to the? Thank you so much. And I apologize, I stumbled a little bit. The action item that we're bringing before you is approve a one-year contract with two-year options for marketing services with Aqua Marketing and Communications Incorporated for a total contract amount not to exceed $600,000 and authorize the CEO to exercise the two-year options. If there's any questions, Amanda and I would be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Al. Thank you, Amanda. From the dais, we have Commissioner Shulman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is so that we can go after federal grant funds for marketing efforts, correct?
We have federal grant funds already.
Okay.
And this will allow us to use those federal grant funds with Aqua Marketing.
And what is the total of those federal grant funds that we already have?
I don't know the answer to that, sir, but I'll have it to you here shortly.
Oh, here comes the answer.
Here comes the answer.
We don't have any specific, within each grant we get, like this coming year, you'll be hearing about it later, about $18 million. And some of what marketing will do qualifies underneath that. And so we can use that money for that. So it's not significant dollars, and I always keep contingencies so that if fun things come up out of marketing, I can use it in the federal side.
So this says it's going to be funded by operating and federal funds. Do we have a sense of what that ratio would look like between our operating and federal funds?
Right now, we have it mostly as operating funds. The federal piece, though, and that's because we haven't had this opportunity because of the way the solicitation was done before. I highly doubt it's going to be significant dollars because they're very good fiscal stewards in the marketing department. But we do set aside a piece every year for them to work with out of our capital funds. Right now, that's at 2%. We think that's a little bit high out of our capital budget. But, you know, over the next couple of years, it'll probably be around $1 million or more.
Okay, so I guess what I'm getting at is there's a $600,000 contract limit. How much, you know, 600,000, did I say, I don't know if I said 600.
600.
$600 would be fine.
Yes, thank you.
600,000, so I'm just trying to understand how much of that might be coming from federal grants, or, you know, are we not moving forward with a particular marketing campaign until we have the federal grants?
No, I've got money set aside for them to move forward regardless of any federal money.
Okay, so the reality is we have 600,000 of operating or capital funds set aside that we may be able to recoup some of that from federal grants down the road.
And that's our goal.
Okay, and that
Spend
600,000.
other people's money is perfect,
Understood. That 600,000 is already in the current budget?
yes.
Okay.
The 600,000 is over 5 years.
Right, I understand. So, but it's, so this is really just, we're already spending this money. Now we're trying to make sure that we do it in a way that gives us an opportunity to reclaim some of
Well
that money
said.
from other pots.
You said that so much better than I did.
I've learned from you. That's where it's come from. Thank you for that. The only other item I had was, and this is to Al, I know in the past we've asked for more detail on the scoring and some of the criteria that was used. You know, we had that for a while and then it went away and then we've asked for it to come back. So, yeah, I know I would appreciate it, even if it's in a separate spreadsheet. You know, what were the scoring metrics? How did that play out? Just as future information down the road.
Yes, sir, I'll make sure that it's included. I apologize.
Thank you. No other questions, sir?
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gao?
Thank you, Chair. And just piggybacking on the wonderful Mr. Schulman, who's eloquent in his questions, is that in addition to the scoring, if we could get some identifier on the minority contractors' businesses so that we can kind of help track that?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
That would be wonderful. Okay, and as I understand it, that Aqua, this is in addition to Jones Worley. And so you've got two marketing companies, basically. I'm assuming that's a Venn diagram, since they're both doing the same thing with a lot of crossover in there. And so what is our contract with Jones Worley?
I'll let Amanda take it.
These two contracts are actually fairly similar, and that is by design. The beauty of marketing agencies is that they all bring their own distinct set of skills and expertise. Jones Worley is very dedicated and has entire departments for wayfinding, branding design, things like that. So those are the kinds of, they've designed our Sunrunner logo and brand guidelines and all of those wonderful things that are going on. The distinct skill set that Aqua brings to the table that we're very excited about is digital marketing and web design services. So on an ongoing basis, there's going to be, Aqua will obviously receive anything that's federally funded by default based on the contract. And then going forward, we'll be able to take a look at an initiative and say, I think really this matches best to Aqua's skill set versus Jones Worley's. As our agency of record, Jones Worley will still be doing most of our work and helping us steer the brand. And there may be projects where the two agencies collaborate.
And just for the public, just to reiterate that while part of the salary is coming from operating funds, the goal is to use other pots so that basically this will be free marketing for us, right?
Yeah.
That's the goal? Okay. That's all that I had.
Thank you, Commissioner Gao.
Mr. Chair, I have one question.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. When you say digital marketing, is that like applications for apps for your phone?
That includes phone apps and various digital advertising applications, so banner ads, YouTube pre-roll ads, keyword search, items like that, Google ads, as well as helping us steer some paid social strategy. Right now, our social media is 100% organic. We don't put any money into Facebook or Instagram at the moment, which we are hoping we can tap into Aqua's skill set to get a little bit of strategic guidance on.
So Aqua will be doing the app for the phone applications? Is that included in the contract?
No, not that.
No?
No.
So who do we use for that? Is that,
That's an excellent question, Commissioner Saraki, excuse me, Mayor Saraki. If it falls under the marketing umbrella, then marketing will be, then Aqua or Jones Worley, probably Aqua will be doing that. So when you develop an app, you have the design and, you know, the aesthetics and the looks like that. They will be able to use Aqua for that portion. But the actual development of an app or something like that, we would have to go out for another vehicle to procure or either select a contractor to develop an application.
thank you. I'm just curious because every time I move somewhere with a marketing application, it's always apps lately on your phone. It's app driven,
Yep.
Web is there, you know, websites have been around for a long time, but currently now all I see is app. So that's why I just had that question, but you answered it fine. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, do we have no more questions? Do we have a motion?
I'll recommend approval of the marketing contract with Aqua Marketing and Communications not to exceed $600,000.
I'll second.
Okay, a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Opposed, none. This passes. Thank you both, Amanda and Al.
Thank you, Dave, for attending this.
And Al, you're still up. Next, to recommend approval of a contract extension with our bank, Bank United. Debbie Leas and Al Burns will take us through this item.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone, again. And I just wanted to start out by saying my colleague, Michael Hansen, who's been our Director of Finance and at Psta for a number of years, has joined what I call the COVID Great Resignation. So as a result of that, we wanted to take a step back and relook at how we're doing the solicitation, or when we're doing the solicitation, for our banking services. Now, our banking services includes our checking accounts that we make for accounts payable and for payroll. We have other investments that we do that's totally separate. So the last time this went out, about 5 years ago, we had it so that the implementation would start on October 1st, the start of our fiscal year. We found that that had a lot of pain points to it as we implemented it. So as a result, what I'd like to do with this action item is extend it out another 6 months so that if we transition, it'll be effective for January 1st. And I think that'll go a lot smoother than what we did this last time. That was one of the lessons that we learned. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Al to talk a little bit on the procurement side, what needs to be done.
Thank you, Debbie. Al Burns, Director of Procurement. On every action item that has a term, we use the words authorize the CEO to exercise the 2-year options or 1-year options, or whatever the option periods may be. If we exceed that, even by 1 day, we have to come before the committee and approval from the board in order to extend this contract, or to extend a contract. So this morning, as Debbie said, Bank United is a great institution. We have no issues with them, but we're just bringing before you a formality of extending the contract by 6 months. The action item that we're recommending to you is that we're bringing before you is recommend approval of a 6-month extension for banking services with Bank United Incorporated. If there's any questions, Debbie or I will be more than happy to answer them.
Commissioner Shulman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not so much a question, but just a request as we're looking at our, the RFP going forward. And I mentioned this, I can't remember if it was planning or finance, before, that we also look at banks' involvement in the community as well, and how they're supporting other areas of our community. So we're not just looking at the financial metrics of what we may be getting, which, you know, in most cases are very, very similar. But we're also looking at the bank's engagement in housing affordability, in community business loans, things like that, so that we're supporting banking institutions that are also supporting our community in other ways.
I think that's an excellent point, and what we could do is we can incorporate that with Debbie approval. We can incorporate that as part of one of the things in the evaluation criteria.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, John. Commissioner Gao?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make sure that Bank United is okay with this 6-month extension.
Well, that's
Because it's a contract, and so.
that is a valid question. I reached out to them, and they're aware that we're bringing this to the Finance Committee this morning. And they said, absolutely, absolutely, Al. And they do plan on submitting a proposal when we do go back out to market. That is a good question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No questions.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I move approval,
I'll support.
Okay, wait a minute.
unless you have a question.
No, I have no question. Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none. That passes. Thank you for your good work. All right, next we have Abhishek Director of Project Management, will explain our agreements with the Sunrunner BRT Transit Signal Priority.
Good morning, Mr. Chair,
Thank you. Good
and
morning,
members of
sir.
the Finance Committee. Abhishek Dayal, Director of Project Management. Happy to present this item to you. As we are getting ready to start operations, hopefully later this year, we're now looking into operations of our Sunrunner. And so as part of the operations, one of the key elements for Sunrunner project is transit signal priority. And the way it works is buses that are running behind schedule by 5 minutes or more, they can ask for priority through the traffic signals that they interact with as they're going through the route. So we already have interlocal agreements with the city of St. Petersburg and Pinellas County that the committee and the board approved a few years ago. And so this item is for action to essentially amend the agreements so that we could include those transit signal priority procedures, operating procedures, so that that gets memorialized once we're in operations for the Sunrunner project. So we work very collaboratively with the staff from City of St. Petersburg and Pinellas County to develop those operating procedures for transit signal priority, and that's what this agreement is going to include. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions, but this item is for action for the committee. Thank you.
Commissioner Shulman?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple quick questions. You said that the buses can ask for priority as they approach signal if they're more than 5 minutes behind. Is that automatic, built in, or is that something the driver actually has to do?
Right, it's fully automatic. Everything, so the bus sends a signal to our radio room, and then the radio room sends a signal to the traffic control centers, and all of that is done automatically without a person involved.
Okay. Wow. And is the traffic signal priority for the entire route?
Yes, yes it is.
Okay, so Pinellas County and St. Peter, the only municipalities that we had to go to on that route?
Correct.
For that. Okay, thank you.
What was your last comment, John?
My last
And it's being tested, yes, right now.
my last question was whether the traffic signal priority was for the entire route
Okay.
of the system, and if Pinellas County and St. Pete were the only municipalities that we needed to
Okay.
have
Okay,
that
that was my
interlocal agreement
question
with.
too. Thank you.
Sure.
Yes,
Yeah.
Commissioner Gown.
With the transit signal priority, is that just something we had to add to our buses, or does that also work with the junction boxes or whatever that run the signal itself? Or is that already built into the traffic light system? We just need to add something.
So we did have to upgrade the controllers, signal controllers all along the intersections where the buses would be running. And then at the same time, we had to upgrade our CAD AVL system on the buses, which is essentially the automated vehicle locator that sends a message to our radio room about the current location of the bus. So all of those things we had to do to enable transit signal priority.
Okay, so if this bus runs another route, for example, even with that on the bus, it wouldn't work because the other traffic lights aren't connected to it.
Well, so we would set aside our Sunrunner buses only for Sunrunner.
Right, theoretically.
But
right.
theoretically, you're correct. So we would only be able to use the fleet that has that upgraded AVL system that can essentially make that communication work.
And is this the only route that we currently have this on?
That's correct.
Or it will be, right? So it's the only one? All right. Do you think that this is something that PSTA could use on other routes?
Yes. We absolutely hope that this will be a success that could be replicated elsewhere in the county to make our buses stay on schedule. So definitely this is a pilot essentially that we're looking at to succeed on and use it on other routes.
Because I do approve this, and I would approve anything that helps with the efficiency of PSTA, puts us in a positive light with the community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I just have a comment. Great job. I think this is wonderful for the community. Looking forward to seeing this in operation. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Shulman.
Yeah, one other quick question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. when the signal's triggered as far as the bus coming, do we know, does it return back to its original timing schedule? Because many of those lights are timed.
Yes, that is the part of the process. So every signal is going to be a little bit different depending on how late the bus is and how close to the intersection it is. So in some cases, there might be a 3-second or a 5-second extra green time, depending on, again, how far the bus is from the intersection. And then it's supposed to return back to the original cycle once the bus leaves.
Okay, so it really just blocks out that time for the bus and then goes back to operating just the way it was.
Right. It sort of transitions back, so it doesn't immediately go right back to what it was. So it incrementally transitions back to the original cycle.
I'm guessing that's to avoid like a 3-second green light, you know, that might occur on the end and. Okay.
Right, yes.
Okay.
Just to make it as seamless as possible.
Understood. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so a question, Abhishek. So other routes that we could take advantage of this technology, would it be like the LX routes, like 52 or something like that?
Yeah.
Well, I noticed in Hillsborough, I'm in Hillsborough a lot now, and they have a lot of limited routes over there, metros they call them. And so it seems like it'd be a benefit on, you know, a limited stop basis anyway.
It could be replicated anywhere, as long as you have those two elements that I described, the CAD AVL system that's upgraded on the bus, and then the signal controllers are upgraded, so you could replicate that.
Okay. Thank you.
I'd like to recommend approval.
Okay.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed, none. Thank you, Abhishek. Good luck. Okay, information items. And as requested by Commissioner Schulman, staff has prepared an analysis of PSTA's ridership trends lately compared to other cities in the country. Brad, can you introduce our presenters here, please?
I'm excited to.
Okay, good.
As the committee hopefully knows, data is one of my favorite things to talk about. And I would like to introduce two of my fellow data geeks at PSTA, Mr. Reed Powers, who's standing there, and Miss Olivia Anderson, who is on Zoom. They are going to walk you through, I think, an interesting discussion of our ridership trends over the last 2 years, and then comparing it to other cities across the country using some data from our American Bus Benchmarking Group. Olivia.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Hello, committee. As Brad said, I'm Olivia Anderson. I am a data analyst with operations here at PSTA.
And I'm Reed Powers, a project planner in the planning department.
And I will be walking you through the first part of the presentation. Today we're going to be talking to you about the effects of the impact on our ridership and then how our ridership is performing in comparison to other agencies. Next slide, please.
Reed. There we go.
And then next slide, please. All right, so as we know, March 2020, the pandemic began. And PSTA responded by reducing service. We put chains up in the buses, rear door boarding only. We suspended fares. We put capacity limitations on our bus to help keep everyone safe, spread out. Obviously, our ridership took a plummet as we made sure that our operators and those riding our buses were safe. And then in October 2020, we increased our ridership. We brought back our highest ridership routes and expanded our service a little bit. Capacity limitations, they were still in place. We still had fares suspended. We were still rear door boarding. And then in February, we brought back almost entirely full service, but our service was now ending at 10 p.m. Capacity limitations were starting to be lifted. We were still suspending fares. We are still rear door boarding only. And then in July, we brought back full service. We launched a soft launch of Flamingo. We brought back cash fares, full boarding, no more chains on the bus. Capacity limitations were fully removed at this point. Our ridership was doing pretty well, but we also saw the surge of the Delta cases that, as well as bringing back cash fares, did cause a little impact on our ridership. And then in October 2021, September, we launched all fares. Flamingo went full fare. We saw the launch of that, and ridership took a plummet as a result. People didn't want to have to pay after spending months and months riding fare free. And as we can see, our ridership has been increasing. Our larger spike of ridership recently is due to spring break. We've had an increase of ridership, and it's been really nice to see. We did want to talk about the fact that in January, there was a dip in the ridership on the board report, but the board report looks at the ridership in a 1-year span. So we were comparing this ridership to last year's ridership in February, where we were fare free and people were riding a little bit more frequently due to the fact that they weren't having to have to pay.
Thank you, Olivia. Everyone can hear me fine?
All right, Reed.
Perfect. All right, so besides just looking at the system ridership as a whole, we also looked at route ridership. You can see these are a few of our higher ridership routes, like the CAT and 52. You can see they all kind of follow the same pattern as the system as a whole, which is expected in that in March and April, when COVID hit, the ridership decreased significantly. There's a pretty quick bounce back, just a few months, and then it kind of stays level at a new normal. And then you can see the same decline throughout all the routes in September when we introduced full fares again. And then you see there is that increase again in March, driven by spring break. But it's not just the beach routes that are going up, it's many routes that aren't, tourist-centric at all. So there might be a few other reasons for that increase in ridership: higher gas prices, a return to full service in February 27th. So it wasn't just a system, one route dominating the system, causing that trend you saw in the last graph. It looks to be a system-wide, all routes, a similar pattern. So this is looking at workplace travel. This data comes from Google, the Google Community Mobility Report, which they get this data from all of your Android phones. And this is showing how often people are driving to work. You can see this is showing that again, when COVID hit, there's about a 50% decrease in workplace travel, and then it kind of goes up relatively quickly. The pattern after that is a little different. It's more of a steady rise as people return back to work. But this is showing that it wasn't just bus passengers who weren't traveling as much. It was all workplace travel was hit significantly by COVID. It wasn't just bus transit, it was all transit was affected by this.
Is that nationwide, or what is that?
This is just Pinellas County. Yeah. So besides just comparing to other modes of transit, how are we doing compared to other agencies? This graph is showing ridership for a number of different agencies that are all in the ABBG bus data sharing group. PSTA is the dark green line there, and then the average for all systems is the black line on there. Yeah. You can see that all of them see a decrease in March, again because COVID, but PSTA saw a little less of a decrease than a lot of other agencies, and we also saw a quicker and higher bounce back than many others. We performed really well during large chunks of the pandemic compared to other agencies. It is only when we reintroduce full cash fares in September where we see that decrease and we kind of go back to what the average is. But even on this graph, which only goes to December 21, you can see that we're still slightly above the average. So by no means are we doing worse than any agency. In fact, for most of the pandemic, we are doing better in terms of ridership than many agencies. So key takeaways, PSTA has recovered from COVID very well, pretty quickly. PSTA has made numerous scheduling and policy changes to ensure that our service matches demand. It's not just PSTA affected, all modes of transit have seen decline. Fares have decreased ridership in recent months, which makes sense. And spring break, gas prices, and a return to full service is likely causing the increase we see in March. Any questions?
Oh. Yes, Commissioner Shulman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So thank you for this. It's helpful to see some additional information on the routes and how things are performing. I'm actually a little surprised on slide 6 when comparing to our bus benchmarking group, how significant of a drop we had from March of 21 to October of 21 compared to others. Now, I look back at the prior slide and I mean, everyone was going through Delta. The only thing we really did was add cash fares.
You want me to go back to it?
No.
I mean, wouldn't you say it's because the average of the other transit systems went back to charging fares long before we did?
Yeah, we stayed fare-free longer than most. We also have, spring break season was less during 21, but it still existed. We still saw it.
So that initial bump up after the start of COVID, the greater increase that we had was due to, so that entire top part of the ridership increase seems to be due to having no fares for the most part, because it really increases when we take away fares, and then it comes back down when fares are added back.
A lot of different things right at the beginning, because that was a weird time. There was the 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and then our system also is used heavily by essential workers, where other agencies might be more like commuters to offices. So we probably saw a lot of people, you know, for 2 weeks, they didn't have to go to work, but then as soon as that was over, they had to go back to work. It's the cashiers.
Yeah, because most transit systems went for a period of time with no fares and boarding from the back door, just like we did. So I think that early pandemic time where we were doing better is probably, as Reed says, due to the kind of our economy being different than other places with very few commute office workers, 9-to-5 workers, and more service, tourist-oriented service employees all over the county going to Chick-fil-A.
So even though it's so thinking about it a different way, even though it's an increase from the others, it's really less of a decrease because we're still below 100%. So what we're saying is it went down because things shut down, but our economy and our riders came back more so during that time frame. But then the question is, if those were essential workers, where'd they go, right? So, you know, we get to October of 2021, and we didn't shut down again. So they didn't all buy cars. I mean, some of them did, and that's why there's no more used cars out there.
The gap rate as COVID hit between the black line and green line is there because, yeah, we were hit less because of our economy, but the gap between the black line and the green line later on is significantly, it looks like double almost. So that would be people taking more rides, not just for work or things like that, but just because it was maybe free. Does that make sense? Like, we decreased less, but we also did see a higher return to ridership quicker than most other agencies.
So I guess, you know, one of the things in my mind as we look forward to recapturing riders that were there and capturing new riders in the community is, you know, what could we do in the future to increase ridership back to where it was for most of 2021, right? Not have that drop off that's there. And I'm not sure, I understand why we had that second drop off when all the other agencies were still going up. And I don't know if that information's, you know, in this data set that you have here. So I realize that's not really a question, it's just more of a wondering as to, you know, in looking at this information as being useful from a planning and looking forward perspective. And I know Commissioner Bennett has.
I'm sure that there is some impact from those people who decided to not only work from home, but to continue to work from home after the pandemic cut back a little bit. So some of our ridership had to be affected by that.
Well, I understand that, and I guess I'm looking at this large section that is raised, and you know, come September, October of 2021, they disappeared. They'd been there for a year or so, almost a year and a half, and then they just stopped, which is why our ridership numbers dropped to where the bus benchmarking group, you know, we were more in line with the average. So I'm just wondering where, you know, who those people were and why they left the transit system, because I'd like them back. And so that's what I'm hoping to. This is at least helpful to know that we're, you know, and I think earlier in the presentation where we were comparing and saying, you know, our numbers this March are less than last March because of different factors that were going on. That makes sense, and that's a little bit more clear when we look at the annual comparisons. Now the next question is, you know, who were these riders and how do we get them back into the system? And I don't think that part's here yet.
One thing that you can see from the graph is the peak in March and April is peak every year. And we're seeing that again right now in 2022 as well. That spring break, those are tourists that don't have cars, and they're riding the trolleys all over the place. That's that peak. If you take out spring break, then we're kind of level. And then it drops, I think it's also just an impact of, maybe as Reed just said, not different people, but number of trips they make because it's free. The impact of charging fares and charging some of the highest fares in Florida is maybe more, elastic than we thought.
Well, and so from a planning perspective and looking forward, I mean, that's some of the, you know, it's good to understand the context of what we're looking at from current trends, but then also using this to make decisions going forward. Yeah. If that is the case, then it's making the case for lower, reduced, or non-existent fares to increase ridership in the system.
Well, during part of this, you know, where we have COVID beginning in April of 2019, we did reduce the capacity on our buses for a number of days, or even months, you know, 15 or less. So we got to bear that in mind too when it comes to trying to extrapolate these numbers, you know. And I don't really know, I don't remember, was it at least a year that we kept it at 1/2 capacity or less? Do we remember? I don't remember.
Olivia, what was it? You showed it on the graph?
It was about a year of reduced capacity. It was about until February that we saw the return of no capacity when we see that nice giant spike, what would have been last spring break.
Okay. Okay.
Sure. May I?
Yes, sir.
And, well, one, I wonder if this doesn't show the value of the Flamingo card, and what can we use that Flamingo card to do as far as to measure and track and find out how our ridership is riding PSTA. How many times the frequency rides it once a day, is it twice a day? Exactly, are they taking it to work but not home from work, et cetera, et cetera. And are we able to do that with Flamingo? To track all that? And
as long as the card number stays the same, which it likely would, then you could see how many times people are tapping a day or month or.
Okay. And are we tracking that? Or maybe that's for the planning committee. Food for thought, don't need to answer that. And then also, I know that we recently reduced our fares by half as a result of the spike in gas prices. And do we know the result of that? Right, that if we didn't increase our ridership because of reduced fares, which is what the intent was, right? Let's try and capture those people that were driving cars. Now they can't afford to drive their cars, and we're reducing our fares, makes PSTA look a lot more attractive. Did we capture anybody from that? Because if we don't capture anybody from that, then it's just losing residue. We're reducing the fares for people who are already riding PSTA, which were not impacted by the rising gas prices because they're riding PSTA. So if we're not capturing increased new ridership, then what was the value of that, and is that being measured?
Right. Well, first of all, the presentation, it's hard to really tell from the presentation because that really kind of went into effect majorly in April, just this month. So we don't know.
Okay.
I mean, but I think there's evidence that ridership was very high this month. No doubt, partially probably due to that half-price sale. That was just on Flamingo.
Right.
And then also spring break and also gas prices being very high. So it's probably a combination of all those things. I think I'll be badgering Reed to be doing analysis about a month from now on what was the impact of the half-price sale.
That's right, and if you can't tell by the questions here, I think we're all a little bit data geeks. And you can find out all kinds of information about this, because we should be measuring all of that. So thank you very much.
You are data geeks, and based on your questions of Abhishek in the last item, you're construction technology geeks too.
All right, have we any more
No.
comment? All right.
Thank you for crunching
you.
all those numbers.
Keep going.
Thank you. Reports.
Julie Lucas, our accounting director.
Good morning, Julie. Our accounting director shall walk us through the monthly financial report for February.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Julie Lucas, Director of Accounting. For the month of February, we finished $545,000 favorable to budget. On the revenue side, passenger fares are $126,000 unfavorable to budget, but expenses came in at $628,000 favorable to budget, which did help February. Purchase transportation follows the continued trend of being under budget, about $230,000 in February, and staff expense control in services and supplies is also assisting with that favorable variance. If you turn to the next page, for February year-to-date, we finished with a surplus of $49.5 million, and we're 2.4 favorable to budget. Passenger fares revenue year-to-date is $457,000 unfavorable to budget, but expenses came in $3 million favorable to budget. Purchase transportation follows that continued trend we saw in the monthly of being under budget, about $1.2 million. And here also, staff expense control in services and supplies is assisting with the favorable variance that we see. So does anyone have any questions? Yes.
So,
Commissioner Shulman?
thank you. This may actually be a question more for Brad. But why is there such a significant decrease in the purchase transportation area? Is that due to service issues as we've discussed? Is it due to, I know we've had programs to help people get off of certain versions of purchase transportation by teaching them how to use the bus and use different routes? I mean, do we have a sense as to what's making up those numbers?
Yeah, I think entirely that savings, which we're grateful for, is due to the new mobility design that the board approved about a year ago, where we've seen basically a 50% drop in the traditional kind of PSA access rides that are a lot more expensive per ride, and transition to the real-time on-demand, mobility on-demand rides. So every time somebody takes an Uber or Lyft, instead of calling in advance for a reserved PSA access ride, it probably on average saves $20 or $30 every time that happens.
So we should then see a decrease in the one number and an increase in the other?
Yeah, and you do see that on the ridership report.
You do.
Okay, that's why I said it might not be a budget question.
No, totally fine. The other part of that, and Brad is 100% correct on that, is that when these numbers were budgeted last year, and remember we were doing this in the summer before the fiscal year even started, with new service providers, it was difficult to budget. We were budgeting a little bit on the unknown based on past practice with a different vendor too. So as we have more information to move forward with in future years, with First Transit and everything, the budget numbers will get tighter because of that.
Yeah. Plus the pandemic. We predicted ridership growth on paratransit. I know in the contract with First Transit we did, and then even in the budget, we assumed a nice growth like that, and it's, I mean, the traditional paratransit has stayed low, and the growth on the mobility has gone up even more than we budgeted, I think.
Well, so I think, and I see that on the ridership report, but I think it's worth noting that that the decrease in purchase transportation through the access program is not an indication of less people riding in general. It's an indication of programs we put in place to get people riding the most efficient way.
Yeah.
Because actually looking, there is about it's almost 100% of the decrease in the one is the increase in the other.
Yeah.
So I think that's worth highlighting as well, because it shows those programs and those efforts and strong fiscal stewardship of our budget occurring. So kudos to the work being done there, not as opposed to something's wrong.
Right.
Brad, how do we get funded through TD now? Is that?
So, that line item that you're seeing there is a combination of different programs related to our bus pass reimbursement from the state TD program, the TD late shift program.
But those funds are still flowing, am I correct?
They are flowing. They're actually, this past legislative session, we saw a fairly substantial increase. What you're going to hear at the planning committee in 45 minutes is a discussion about a question of whether we're able to draw down all the funds that we could be drawing down. So we're making recommended changes to that. I think the reason you're seeing a decrease is because we're not drawing down as much, and therefore having the expense of the bus passes, because we're not getting as many transportation disadvantaged bus pass applicants. I think.
Makes sense.
Any other questions?
Commissioner Shulman, do you have any other questions?
Yeah.
Just for that, I have 25 other questions. How much wood could a
No, I
woodchuck?
saw you had your microphone up, but so wanted to make sure you didn't start.
No questions, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, and thank you, Brad.
Oh, and the next, Brad, would you like to talk about contracts and ridership?
I would love to.
Okay, thank you.
In your packet is the quarterly ranking of all of our different contracts that the PSA Finance Committee has had lots of discussions about and has approved in order of our biggest contractor to our smallest. Probably not too much change in the top 10 rankings from last quarter. And then on the ridership page, which is at your places as well, again, we've discussed sort of the growth in ridership in March due to a number of different factors, which is a positive sign, even though we are now charging fares to every customer rather than totally free. And then we're going to have a discussion further on the issues with complaints with Psta access. Again, that's comparing to a year ago when we had, during the pandemic, when we had very, very few complaints every single month. So while it might look like a large increase, it probably is more like a very small number of complaints, leading to those percentage increases. Happy to answer any questions on the contracts or the data.
Commissioner Gao?
Brad, on the UPass trips,
Yeah,
right, we're at 23.9 for the month and what, 93.5 for
Yeah.
the year.
we're seeing a nice increase in that.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering what the status is on that. What is PSVE doing to continue the partnership with Pinellas County Schools to increase the marketing on that, or just trying to get the message out? And so just kind of what are we doing with that program? Because it looks impressive, I like the numbers, but those numbers might be crap to where we could be. You know, so we don't know that baseline yet, so I'm just trying to figure out.
Yeah, I don't know. Reed, do you have any comments on the UPass number? Press the button to ignite it.
We don't really know like who's using it. It could be the people at the high school or the middle school using the passes, or university students. They just operators hit a button whenever anyone available for UPass uses it. So there's no really good way to distinguish. Does that answer?
So we can't track by schools, which schools are using it, which.
We can do surveys.
We do surveys.
We can do surveys, and then we can also pull like GPS data on where people are getting on and off, you know, by the bus stops near the high schools, and see ridership. But that's not necessarily the kids riding. They could be going to a job, or you know, not to school. We are seeing a pretty substantial increase since January when we put the program in place. Higher than our ridership increase. So undoubtedly, we're seeing more and more school kids take advantage of it.
Is there a reason why we're not tracking that? You know, I know it's minors as well, so that might be a concern. But do we have, through whatever device they're using, to acknowledge that they're a UPass rider, like the Flamingo card has a number attached? Do we have that ability to capture that data?
We do not.
Should we be able to have
Again,
that?
it is based on the
And I know it's a pilot
Pinellas County
program.
Schools IDs.
Okay.
We've learned that Pinellas County Schools is a very delegated authority over the school IDs per school. Every school is kind of a little bit different. Some schools keep all their students' IDs in their principal's drawer, and they only give them out on a very limited basis. Other schools give them out all the time and are really promoting the program and having lots of kids ride the bus that goes right by their school. It's sort of hit and miss. But the word is getting out. The school district is doing promotions within their own programs. I think it's going just fine. And again, we're sort of coming out of the pandemic here. I think once we get hopefully fully out of the pandemic, or in a more normal school year next fall, I think it'll be maybe a time to do a survey where we survey the UPass riders, and you know the drivers can ask or write down, okay, you're a St. Pete College, you're a Pinellas County School ID, and you know keep track of that.
Or our new Aqua digital marketing group that might be able to analyze. I know if I say Facebook, that tells you that I'm old. So
Yeah,
on
using Facebook and
Snapchat
facial
or
recognition.
TikTok or Instagram, and maybe target those students. Because I think it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity between the partnership of PSTA and the school system to really have a positive impact on the students. You know, one of the things we always criticize the students on their inability to think critically. And I think a lot of times we don't allow them the opportunity to think critically. And so I think independence on getting to school is part of that. On the school liaison from our city commission to our community schools in Dunedin. And so I have conversations all the time with the principal on what we could be doing, and I'm a big advocate for this. And so if I can get data on it, whatever data is available for our Dunedin schools, so that's a conversation piece that I can have with those school administrators, I'd be more than happy to have that conversation. So let the boards and committees work for you. should all be beating this drum.
Yeah, Commissioner Schulman.
Thank you. I want to piggyback on Commissioner Gao's comments. I will say, I know as a parent, I received a school newsletter last week that talked about riding on the buses for free. But we struggle with the same thing, right? So all of the school IDs are held by the principal or the teacher, and so the students don't have access to those. I definitely would love, and I've mentioned this before, love to see us moving towards having that as a Flamingo option. Most of the older kids have a phone already, so they don't even need a card. But I also want to make sure that we are working with administration. I don't know if over the summer, I'm guessing they probably have opportunities for principals and vice principals to get together with senior level administrators at little mini conferences here in the county. And we should be presenting our services at that point. I was a little surprised at a welcoming orientation for incoming middle schoolers. The vice principal did not even, spent 25 minutes talking about transportation and school buses and how it's a problem and they don't have drivers and parents and if you could carpool and all these different things, and didn't mention PSTA at all.
Oh.
So, and it wasn't, when I reached out to her afterwards, she said it wasn't due to not wanting to mention PSTA, it just didn't occur to her. And I realized it was still relatively new with this system, but it also tells us that there's a lot of work to do with increasing that message to the people that are then pushing that message down the line to the next set of users, as opposed to trying to reach each individual user on their own. Having that come through the grapevine can work wonders. And Commissioner Gao was talking about another presentation. I know Commissioner Strachey saw it as well, about the walking buses or rolling buses where, family members can coordinate with groups of students to walk to a centralized location like a PSTA bus stop, so you can get your kids to a bus stop as opposed to relying on the yellow buses. But I think the biggest first step to that is getting Flamingo to recognize UPass and any student that wants the Flamingo having it. The sooner we can get them using, even if it's just the difference of using their ID versus using the Flamingo card, the sooner they'll be set to ride the bus when they're no longer a student. Training them to do this normally, training them to train their parents on how to do this, which is how most things with technology would work. So definitely there's opportunities here, and we had a great first step of even getting to this point, but there's a lot more to be done.
I know my mother grew up in St. Pete and talks about growing up in St. Pete and riding the bus all the time. That was your main source of transportation. And when my girls were little, she insisted that they learn the public transit routes, and she would ride the buses with them all the time now, because that was great as a child. Certainly when they became teenagers and young adults, no, they were with the rest of society and they've got their cars and things of that nature. So that certainly, in my own family, was an opportunity missed. But anytime that we can encourage young people to ride and get addicted to public transit, that we have to solve our transportation problem in the county and in the region. So, and PSTA plays a major role in that. And I'm off my soapbox.
All right.
Maybe your idea on using the powers of marketing and Aqua and tracking people's location with Instagram, we should focus on the Instagram and Facebook accounts of the principals of the schools to brainwash them with UPass promotions, so that when they give a speech, that it comes into their mind.
It is certainly easier to reach
Subliminally.
the top of the pyramid and have it trickle down than to try to reach every individual user at the bottom.
Exactly.
All right.
Wants to talk.
Brad, is that it?
Yeah.
All righty. Does any other committee member have any other business before this board? This meeting is adjourned. Next meeting is May 19th.
Thursday.
Thursday.
Thursday. It's on a
Thank you.
Thursday.
Didn't want to do it on my birthday.
Your birthday's on the 18th?
20th.
Oh,
And now that I've said
My
it,
wife's birthday too.
it's whose birthday?
May 20th.
Whose birthday?
My wife.
Oh, no.
For
She must be
real?
a lovely person. Her mic's on, be careful.